Hello and welcome to Dear Franny. I am your host, Francesca Hogi. Thank you so much for listening. I want to give a special shout out today to, first of all, the people who have written reviews for the podcast. I so appreciate you. I see you. Thank you so much. And I also want to give a shout out to the listeners all around the world because I'm seeing downloads in India and Russia and Italy and Sweden and Brazil and New Zealand and Canada and Australia. And it's just really, really cool and exciting and a little bit surreal that people around the world are listening to my little podcast. But I appreciate you so much. And speaking of appreciation, today I have an interview with the person that I appreciate probably more than anyone in the world. And that is my mother, Joyce Hogi. And she shares with us today just about her life and growing up in rural Alabama and moving to New York in 1963 and the very scandalous story of how she met my father and just so many other things. So she's very wise. She's very wonderful. Please enjoy my interview with my mama, Joyce Hogi. Mama, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. This is exciting.
It is, right? I don't know, a couple weeks ago, I just had this thought. I'm like, I need to interview my mom. And thank you for being willing.
I'm a real good guy, you know?
I know you are. You're a great guy. And you're very modest, which I also, it's a wonderful quality. I love it. This is actually, I don't know if you remember, this is the second time I've interviewed you.
Yes.
I did a video interview with you for Huffington Post some years ago.
Up at the cases.
Yes, in Providence, in Rhode Island. Those are our other family, for those of you who are listening, the Case family. Yeah, so this is the first time we've gotten to sit down in this kind of formal way. And I don't know, Mama, you're just a person who you are, you have a lot of wisdom. There are a lot of people who turn to you for advice and guidance in various parts of their lives. And those are the kinds of people that I like to interview on this show. So, and you're my mother.
Well, thank you for that.
Why don't you tell everyone a little bit about yourself? Where are you? How are you? What's going on?
Well, I am in New York. I live in the Bronx, New York, and I have been, I guess you could say, sheltering since this whole pandemic started. I do get out once a day for a walk in the mornings with my mask and with my daughter, Jana, your sister.
Mm-hmm.
Frankly, I don't do anything without Jana.
Yeah.
Because she is taking really good care of me. And I'm sensitive to the fact that my letting her have that responsibility, because I really didn't give it to her. She just sort of took it on.
Yeah. Well, that's very much who she is.
Yes. And I just know that it helps her to perform in her duties because she's working. She's working from home and has been since March 11th. And it takes pressure off of her from her work because that's stressful too.
Yeah.
But to know that I'm going to be doing what she's suggesting and what she's accompanying me with, I think is very comforting for her. So that's what I'm doing.
This is very classic for you. Like you're always someone who you really think about how your actions affect other people. And because you're saying like, well, yes, Jana's being there for you and that's great. And she's taking good care of you, but you're like, but also it gives her more confidence and allows her to do her job better. Like you're always looking at that other angle. And I guess like, where did you learn to do that? Because that's not something that you saw. Did you see that modeled growing up?
I did not. And I don't know where I learned it. It's just a way of making me feel better about what I am doing because there's always two sides to every story. So somewhere along the line, it just kicked in with me that if one thing is happening, then there's something else that's either driving it or stymieing it. So I try to look for that and not so much in a aware stage. It's just an inner feeling that I have that I really would like to know what's going on either side. So I guess that's where it comes from because I absolutely was not raised that way.
Yeah, yeah. Why don't you just kind of briefly describe how you were raised for people who are listening? Tell them a little bit about yourself. Where are you from? How'd you grow up?
I was born in the deep South.
Deep.
Deep South, a little town called Leroy, Alabama, and I am the youngest of 9 children. My older siblings always used to tell me, they don't say it so much anymore, oh, we were very poor, and by the time you came along, things weren't as bad as they were with us. And that's probably very true. Mm-hmm. But I grew up fairly comfortable, but in a very rigid household. My parents literally didn't let me do much of anything for myself on my own. It was do it our way or no way. They exposed us to educational venues. My mom was very adamant about that, even though neither of them ever got through elementary school.
Wow.
6th grade was their absolute last years of schooling.
Do you know what did they do after that? Because what are they? You're 11 years old at that point. What did they do? Do you know what their lives were like? Like, so when you stopped going to school at that age during that time,
right?
I mean, we're talking I guess that would have been 1920s or earlier.
Yeah, it was earlier. What happened was my mother's parents, my maternal grandparents, farmed, and they had amassed a lot of property. So they did a lot of farming, and it was mostly for survival, not so much for profit.
Yeah.
And my mom was the eldest of 14. So she was always in the responsible position. And I remember that she got married at age 17 because she said that she was tired of taking care of babies.
Right.
It's like her siblings.
All her little siblings, yeah.
But what's so ironic is she got married in 1919, I think it was. And in 1922, she had her first child, my brother Joe. So she was starting to have children right along with her own mother's children. So a lot of her children are around the same age as her siblings.
That's so crazy.
So she sort of jumped out of the frying pan into the fire, so to speak.
Yeah.
But it was a big household, big family, and I guess they pretty much got along. I think they had a lot of resentment from having to work so hard. And my mom, being the more responsible person, always worked the hardest.
She worked harder than your dad?
My dad took a job it was construction at what we call a cement plant. There was a little town there near us that had this unique limestone that this cement company had contracted to break up that limestone and put it on a barge and ship it down the Tombigbee River to New Orleans where they made cement. So that's what he did. And Mom pretty much ran the household and took care of the farming chores. And as her children grew up, she put them into that farming scenario. As my brothers, because there was 7 boys, as they became of age, they joined the service. And I think that was more to get away from all that hard work of farming.
Yeah. How did you like farming?
Well, as I said, by the time I came along, there wasn't that heavy concentration on farming, even though I did a lot of it. I picked cotton, worked in the garden. I harvested crops from the garden.
Yeah.
And my mom was very progressive. She raised every kind of poultry that you could imagine. Turkeys, ducks, geese, chickens, guinea hens.
Oh, wow.
She really was very progressive. And she was the kind of person that would read magazines and expose us to those kinds of things. So it really was sort of a fun household. It was a fun household because there was a lot of learning going on there.
So what year were you born?
I was born in 1943.
Okay, I knew that, but I wanted you to say it. Deep South, Leroy, Alabama, so it was segregated. And actually, you never lived, you were 20 when you left Alabama, right?
19, yes.
19. And Alabama was still segregated there. So your entire childhood and upbringing was during segregation. So what was that like for you?
Well, and this is sort of a conflict because we always had a lot of property and we really didn't depend on anyone for our well-being. And that was a justification that I always use, that if a person didn't have much, they were more susceptible to being discriminated against. My mother's father was the product of a white man and a woman of Cherokee heritage. So he essentially looked white when he moved into the community, and he was treated very much as a white person.
Oh, that's how we got all that land.
Pretty much.
I was wondering about that.
He had amassed over 200 acres of land.
Did he pass? Like, was he pretending to be white or?
Nope. My grandmother was, I believe, descendant of slaves, and she was nothing near white. They were like
Chocolate and vanilla. Yeah.
Yeah. And he really did not pretend, he didn't try to pass, but he was just treated with that respect.
That colorism, yeah.
Yeah, because he moved into the county from another part of the state, and people really didn't know who he was. They just saw him as a white man.
Yeah.
So we had a lot of protection in that regard. So even though we saw the signs of white only, black only.
Colored only. They said colored back then, right? Didn't say black.
Yes. I don't remember being a part of that discriminatory behavior.
You were very self-sufficient, and I know you had your land, and it's also very rural, so it wasn't like you had a lot of interaction with other people at all. But I guess, but in terms of how did you feel about the fact that you went to the colored school and you knew there was a white school, and wasn't the white school actually closer to home than the colored school?
It was, yes.
So how did you feel about that? Like, how far did you have to go to school?
Well, my father purchased 2 school buses, and my brothers drove the school buses.
Yeah.
So we always had transportation to school. And because it was an accepted practice that there was a white school and there was a black school, and there were white churches and black churches, it wasn't something that weighed on me. I never felt the need.
It just felt normal.
I never felt the need to integrate or, why can't I go to that school? Because I was very happy in my school. Everybody at that school were very happy. Our teachers were outstanding and just so caring that we didn't really think we were missing so much. The only thing that, and I think about this now, but didn't think about it then at all, is that we got secondhand books. You knew the books had been used at other schools, and we got them. But we learned from them, and that was essentially all that mattered to us.
So when you were growing up, did you plan on staying in Alabama forever? Because you speak very fondly of your childhood, but then you also still left when you were 19 and went to New York City, and that's where you've been ever since.
I left because there really, in my mind, there was no opportunities to advance. And I guess my parents really did not want me to leave home. That was just like a slap in the face. But they had exposed me to so much that it wasn't happening there in Alabama for me. And I always had the urge to explore for more,
Yeah.
My older brothers, one brother who lived in Chicago, my parents put me on a train and let me go visit with him for a while. When my sister-in-law had their first child, I was allowed to do that. So my eyes were just opening to so many, not so much opportunities, but just so many other things going on in the world.
Yeah.
Other than the rural life of
Leroy, Alabama.
And and the I guess by the time I was doing that, there were only about 3 of us, my siblings,
Still at home.
that was still at home. The others had, gone away, they'd married, living other places, and I got to visit them and go, wow, this is wonderful. This is a place other than trees and dirt roads. What are these things?
Yeah. I question though, but you chose New York, and none of your siblings were in New York. So you still were really striking out on your own, though there were these other places that you could have gone to. So why New York? What drew you to New York? specifically?
What drew me to New York, there was this one family of girls that lived in the town who had gone to New York on babysitting jobs. And when I was flailing around and saying, I really do have to leave Leroy, there's just nothing here for me, one of them said, why don't you come to New York? And I said, that sounds okay. Well, New York was just like it was like a poison stone as far as my parents were concerned, and they just refused to send me. Said, no, you can't go. It's a terrible place. Well, this neighbor
Had they ever been there?
no.
Yeah, I didn't think so. I was just checking.
Of course not. Just reading and hearing, But my neighbor said, she said, I'll send you your bus fare. And she did. And that's how I came to New York.
Wait, I can't believe your parents let you go, though, even when you had the money. I guess they couldn't physically tie you up and stop you from going, but I bet they tried.
They did.
Do you remember how much the bus fare was?
Oh, geez, no. Less than $50, that's for sure.
Yeah, I would guess, right? I mean,
it wasn't anything that my parents could not have afforded to do.
Yeah, they just didn't want you to go. No, I was just curious, just out of a, anthropological curiosity. Okay, so let's jump ahead and let's get into your love story. So tell the story of when you first met Ed Hogi.
I think the last time I told this story was the day that Ed passed away, because the nurses sat with me and they just wanted me to tell them the story, because I was sitting there holding his hand. And so a girlfriend of mine and I were going out. We were sort of hanging out, bunch of single girls, and we decided to go to this pub, this tavern. And while we were there, we ran into a friend of mine who was a photographer, and we struck up a chat, and he had to leave because he was going to photograph some show at a ballroom. And he says, I'll be back. So you just stay here. So after he left, there were two guys that came in and saw us and offered to buy us drinks. And we said, sure. And we sat and talking. And while we're talking, this man walks in wearing this leather jacket. I don't know if you've ever seen a worn leather jacket, when the leather gets soft and pliable,
Yes, mother.
Anyway, this man knew the two guys that were sitting with us. And they said, oh, come on over and sit with us. Come. And so he was very polite. And he says, oh, no, you're together. So I said, sure, come on over, And it's the sound of that jacket, and he's walking. Somehow, I don't know why I still remember that.
I've heard you talk about this jacket before.
It's just nuts. But anyway, he came and he sat with us, and we were just talking and drinking, and he finally suggested that we go dancing. So off we went dancing, and he had this little Mustang. We drove up to Harlem to Small's Paradise, where they had live band and dancing, and we danced just for hours, And the guys got tired and they left. But Ed, your dad, was still raring to go. And he said, oh, I know this after-hour place where we can go. They have another good band. So we went, and it was too crowded. So as we were leaving, he said, I know another one. So
Goodness, Eddie Hogi. It's just in these streets.
So we came out, and we saw a woman hailing a cab, and he stopped and asked her where was she going, and she told him, and she happened to be going home, which was in the same building of this after-hours place that we were going to. So he said, oh, come on, go with us.
Oh, my goodness. That's so New York, those crazy coincidences, yeah.
We just wound up dancing. And he would repeat this to me sometimes. He says, somehow, he said, at one point, we were dancing, and something told me, take a look at this girl,
Oh. Oh, my goodness.
Because my girlfriend was, I guess we were both attractive women, but she probably was more attractive than I was,
I don't know about that, Mother. I'm going to need to see some photographic evidence of
Maybe
this
not.
alleged.
Maybe not. The thought was that maybe he was leaning more toward her in terms of paying more attention to her. But as we were dancing, he just said, something said, take a look at this girl, And we just kept dancing. And anyway, at about 5:30 in the morning, we were all danced out. So he took us home, but he took her home first.
Oh my goodness. I don't know. Okay. You want to tell me the real story. This is I am listening to my mother tell me about the night she met my father, went bar hopping, dancing until 5:30 in the morning.
So he took, I'll call her Mary, home. So it's daylight now. And I had a dog at the time. And I said, well, I got to walk the dog. He said, oh, I'll go with you. So I went up, I got the dog, and we came out and walked the dog, and we talked and talked. And as you know from your father, he talks nonstop. But he asked if he could see me again. So I agreed. And the rest, I guess, is history. Really. It really is history.
I mean, you were together from that first day, the first night, right?
He just turned out to be the most interesting person. He was 17 years older than me.
That's the really scandalous part. If I had ever come home with a man who was 17 years older than me, how would you have reacted to that?
You know what? I probably would have been suspicious. I would have been suspicious, but I would also have looked at the man, because this is pretty much what happened with my parents when they met him. My mother was livid. My dad was much more forgiving. They came to visit at one point, and Ed was taking them around, My dad was just really enchanted with him. It took my mom many years that she could be completely accepting of him. And that's a long story too. That goes back a while. But if you came home with someone that was 17 years older, I would definitely go, But I would also look at both you and he to see there's some commonalities there, that there's something there that one can enhance the other. And many times we would go to jazz clubs, or he'd be talking, because he loved jazz, and he was always talking about jazz artists. And he says, don't you remember, sweetheart? I go, no, I wasn't born then.
Right. Oh my gosh. You know what? It's interesting though, because the two of you you didn't seem to have an age difference. Like, he was incredibly youthful. Yes. And so he easily just kind of had the energy of someone who was 20 years younger than him at any given age. So I think that's the thing. I think if you had looked like, why is she with that old man? That would have felt like, that would have been different. But you guys just looked like you went together.
He absolutely was as comfortable with me as I was with him. And we just had so much in common, except when he'd asked me about something that had happened 30 years ago.
Before you were born. Or he's telling you about fighting in World War II, and you're like, you are old.
I was just born in 43. Come on already.
Oh my goodness. I remember I was saying to someone, had mentioned to someone that my dad was a World War II vet, and they're like, did you mean your granddad? I'm like, nope. My father was born in 1926. And he was... Okay, so, all right. So yeah, the rest kind of history. Actually, how soon did you move in together? So scandalous.
Oh, it was scandalous. It was 6 months.
It was that long? Are you just saying that for the podcast? I don't think it was that long.
No. I think it was about 6 months. Yeah.
Okay. And then how long were you together before you got married?
Year and a half.
Okay. It's so interesting because, the thought of the two of you like out all night on the town. I mean, I can picture it actually because, you guys always like to have fun, but you never went out like that ever, by the time I came along.
We had all danced out.
Yeah, I didn't. the dancing was only in the living room at that point. But
And then we had some mouths to feed. We had to make our choices.
right. But oh my God, it's just so crazy. It's so crazy to think. I wish I had just like video footage of the two of you from that time. But it was very scandalous for you to be, I mean, especially the way you were raised, for you to be living with your boyfriend in New York City. I mean, I can only imagine.
Oh, gosh.
Scandalized everyone in the family was. You were a rebel.
Pretty much. I just rebelled in all ways. You know, as I was growing up, I had all this long, beautiful hair. I had so much hair. Sometimes my sister would say, Joyce would like squat down and her hair would touch the ground. She had so much hair. And I came to New York.
It was your crowning glory. So you cut your hair so short. I love that you did that, especially that time. And, you know, there are people who are listening to this who definitely understand the significance of that. But for people who don't, let me just give you a really quick, like a quick primer on Black people and hair historically. And, you know, just the real, you know, obsession with hair and having long hair and quote unquote good hair, which I hate that expression, that term, because it's so just based in white supremacy and whatever. But your hair, because you have, I mean, how often did people comment on your hair when you were growing up?
Oh gosh, they always commented on my hair.
That was like, you were known for it.
To the point that I didn't think they saw anything else but hair, you know. And last year, quick aside, when I went down to help start this organization to support our now closed school, one of the girls that was working with me there, she said, when you used to come home, she said, oh, your hair. She said, oh, I loved your hair so much. You know, she said, oh, I wish I had your hair. And this is,
oh my goodness,
this is what people talked about, you know?
This is what people talked about. It's so crazy. Because I've even heard people, you know, at different family gatherings through the years, people will someone will always inevitably say, oh, Joyce, oh, you should have just seen the hair on Joyce. Oh, she has some good hair. Oh, she got some good hair. And I'm like, oh, God. Actually, I remember growing up and wishing, I was like, why can't I have hair like that? Because I did not inherit your hair.
People used to say, they says, you girls don't have hair like you. And I go, yeah, so what am I supposed to do about that?
You know, the fact that you did not really internalize that, because so many, and whether it's, you know, we're talking about hair, but this could be, you know, so many different things for different people that you just get so much attention for. And, you know, it might mean, you know, maybe for some people it's like you were a really good athlete and that's, you know, became your identity, or, you know, you were really good looking and that became your identity, or, you know, something like that. And it can be really, really hard for people to separate who they really are from that superficial thing that people associate with them, or that identity that people associate. So for you to grow up the way you did, have this whole thing with your hair, just like basically another character in your family. And because your sister also didn't have hair like yours, and then to like move to New York and then literally chop all of your hair off is like it's really rebellious. I mean, there are women today who don't have that experience who would still never cut their hair off. They'd be like, no, I can't do that, you know? So that just took a lot of courage.
Well, I think about it sometimes. I had the need to make my own identity. You know, I had to be me. You know, you hear that song, I Gotta Be Me. I really did. People say, oh, you cut your hair. I go home to visit and people would be outraged and they go, oh, your hair. I said, you know what? It'll grow back. It's just hair.
And it did. You had lots of hair different times of your life. Yes.
Just kept growing. But yeah, that was...
Oh my gosh, so funny.
Yeah, that was a real thing. And people still talk about it, between the hair and your sing. Oh, do you still sing? And I go, no, I don't.
That's right. I know we could talk about your singing career too. That's like a whole other thing. Wait, yes, my mother used to be a jazz singer. Well, you were more of like an R&B singer. Do you ever think, okay, now I want to ask you about your singing career briefly. Do you ever look back and think, oh, you know, I wonder if I had stuck with it, if I really could have made it? Or do you just think, I'm glad I didn't make it. That's not a life that I wanted.
Well, I think I can definitively say that's not a life that I wanted. It was not for me. I did not like being called upon to sing when somebody wanted me to sing. And I think that a lot of that leads to the excesses in show business now. I didn't always feel like singing. So to be coerced or forced into doing something when I would just rather lie in the grass and look at the sun, look at the stars,
Well, you weren't coerced. I mean, you were being paid, right?
Yeah,
It's not
but
like
not a whole lot. I mean, and the compromises that you had to make. I had come too far in making my own identity or carving out my own identity than to compromise myself for the sake of singing. It just wasn't something that I could bring myself to do. Absolutely could not do that.
I love that we're having this conversation, Mother. I mean, it's not like I don't know these things, but it's just, I don't know. I am learning some things and having a lot of realizations. I'm like, oh, it's giving me so much to think about. So you were definitely the person who I consider to be my biggest influence in life. So this morning I was writing in my gratitude journal, as I try to do every day. And I think you know that I keep a gratitude journal. For people who are listening, I keep a gratitude journal and I write down 5 things a day that I'm grateful for. And it can be like very, very varied things. Like sometimes it's like, oh, my plant is doing well. Or, I mean, a particular plant. I have a lot of plants. Or like breakfast was good or the weather was perfect. And sometimes it's, deeper things. But today I was like, I'm just going to write about my mom. And, Mother, whenever I post about you on social media, I always use the hashtag Mama Jackpot because I really do feel like I got lucky. I'm like, oh man, so lucky, so lucky. So, okay, so here are 5 things that came to me today. I mean, I could go on and on, but these are the first 5 things that came to me this morning that I'm grateful for about you. And so the first thing is that you're extremely loving and caretaking. You're like a natural born mother. You're just so good at taking care of people.
Wow. I'm blushing.
And I guess you just, that's just who you are. You've always been like that, huh?
Pretty much.
Yeah. Which is actually, considering the fact that you're the youngest of 9, it's unusual for youngest children to be so caretaking of other people, because usually youngest children are the ones who get taken care of and, can be a little bit more spoiled. And I say this as a youngest child. I wonder, I don't know, I guess, I always think, people always, and for years have asked me, do you want to have kids? Do you want to have kids? And, I've just always felt like I just don't think I have it in me to be the kind of mother that you were. And I just feel like that, it'd be one thing if I didn't know any better. And I'd be like, sure, have a kid. But I think back and I just think of like the enthusiasm you had for your children and for just like doing things with us and going places with us and, I don't know, baking a cake or just all these things. And I'm like, oh God, that just sounds so exhausting. But I wonder, when I was a kid and I was growing up, did you think that I would grow up and get married and have children?
Well, in the sense that this is what is normally expected of your offspring or anyone, that they will grow up and have a family. I think you sell yourself short when you say you don't think you could be a good mother, because I've seen you with children and babies, and you have an absolute inner drive to care for children. I really think you sell yourself short. You may not see it, but I see it when I see you with other children, that you're very good at that. And you're very natural with it. You can do it seemingly without thinking about it.
Yes.
So I don't know if I influenced you in that way, or if you just have this inner engine that drives you in that way. Or sometimes when a person, the way they behave is how they want people to behave toward them. So that could be an instance also.
Yeah.
But I think you have very good instincts with children.
And thank you. Thank you for saying that, Mama. I appreciate it. And I do love children, and I do know that I do feel like I'm a natural with them in terms of relating to them. And, obviously, I have so many children in my life who I love. But in terms of, I think one of the reasons why I can have, children that I'm close to and that's great for me is that because they're not mine. You know what I think? I think I would be an amazing parent to a teenager, because you're at that point, it's like and I know most people like don't like teenagers, but I actually like them, because I'm like, at that point, you really know who you are as a person. And I mean, even though you may not be able to fully articulate it as a teenager, and I think that's part of the job of the adults in your life to really help guide you to discovering like who you are. But I think that stage is one where the autonomy of a teenager is, I can deal with that. But when I think about being a parent to young children, where you have to do everything for them and they're so dependent on you, and in order to really be a good parent, you've got to prioritize them so much. And I just feel that I am too, and I don't even say I'm too selfish of a person, because I don't think I'm the most selfish person. I think I'm, whatever I'm giving, I try to be. I mean, I'm kind of selfish, but but just, I don't know, that just feels really overwhelming to me. But I don't know. I some people say to me, they're like, your mother would be the world's greatest grandmother. You got to give your mother a grandchild. It's such a waste for her not to have a grandchild. I'm like, all right, she got kids in her life that they consider her grandma. So don't worry. She's fine. You're fine, right, Mother?
I'm fine. Right. I am totally fine with it. Totally fine.
I also love never ever had pressure to have children, which is another thing that I really appreciate about you. Okay, so number 2, you have a strong sense of self, and you modeled that for me really well. So I think I always had permission to just be myself. I never felt like I had to try to pretend to be someone that I wasn't, or into something that I wasn't. Like, I think I always felt very accepted by you for who I am. But I wonder, for you, knowing how your parents, especially your mother, was not the most accepting of others, right? She wanted things the way that she wanted them. How do you, what do you think that it was within you that was able to really resist that pressure from her, and to really just, I don't know yourself?
I have thought about that at some point. I've even tried to go back in time and think about the dynamics between my mom and me, or my parents and me. I think one of the things was that when my mom was suffering with Alzheimer's for a while, and my sister was caring for her, I went down to relieve my sister for a week, and my mom could only remember me. And she said, "Oh, Joyce, let's go shopping," and it was that kind of thing. I thought it was at the time, it was sort of curious to me. And then I thought about it, and I said, the things that she did, that she wanted to go somewhere, I would accommodate her. And I think that took some of the pressure off her harshness toward me, is that I really did it was almost manipulative, in the sense that if it was somebody she wanted to visit, and I go, "Oh, I don't want to go visit them," I said, "Okay, I'll go."
Interesting.
So I really do think that that's how I survived.
Mm-hmm.
And was able to, I guess, survive in Leroy, Alabama.
Yeah, it's like you gave her enough of what she wanted that you were then able to protect the rest of yourself.
Yeah, that's very well put. But I've thought about it many times, and I go, all the times that, I dragged me along somewhere and I absolutely did not want to go, but I put on a happy face or a pleasant face, and I did it. And people always said, "Oh, Joyce, you're so lucky you have Joyce, and she's just wonderful," But it was putting aside a part of me to get a part of me, if that makes any sense at all.
It does make sense. Wow, so interesting. Okay, I want to get through these. I want to go through these kind of quickly, but I want you to hear these. So next, I have that you are very proactive and adaptable. And what I mean by that is, like, when something is not working, you've never been a person to just complain about things. You've always been like, all right, this isn't working, so what now? Like, what do we do now? How do I fix it? I took for granted that was just how a person was to approach life. Like, that's just sensible. Like, fix it, And, this is something that I'm so grateful for you for having this quality, because this is something that I've definitely inherited from you. So I just want to personally thank you, because...
Oh, you're welcome.
Because what it is and what it showed me was that, even though it took me, I've been through it, but I've been through all my own shit, but it took me it allowed me to see that you have some control over your life. Like there are a lot of things that you don't have control over that happen in life, but there are things that you do have control over. And those are the things you need to focus on. Like you need to focus on, taking the steps, doing the things that you can and not spending all of your energy worrying about things that you can't control. I remember, this is a classic Joyce Hogi line is used to say this all the time when I was growing up, that you're like, I don't worry, because if worry changed anything, I would be the world's greatest worrier, but it doesn't. So
yeah.
You said that so many times, and I just appreciate that. It's like very pragmatic, which is also related to the next thing on my list, which is that you are very calm and level-headed.
Yeah, I don't know where I got that from either, except that I just figure, why worry? Who may worry?
Yeah. Do you think growing up, were you the calmest person in your household?
Yes, I'd say yes. No, actually, I was not. I think my brother Sam was probably the calmest.
Probably Uncle Sam.
He was very calm.
Uncle Sam was very calm.
I probably was the second calmest.
Yeah. Well, it's funny. Yeah, he had music and you had music. I wonder if that helped.
It might have.
I wonder. So interesting. I've been thinking, oh gosh, I have so many things to talk about. Okay, moving on. Next. Well, okay, I'll just say it quickly because that's annoying that I started to say something and didn't finish it. But I was thinking a lot about, I have been thinking, and I did actually a podcast episode recently. The last episode is about creativity. And I've only kind of recently started to understand the importance of creativity in just happiness, because everyone has we're all creative in some way, right? And I think, I grew up thinking that I wasn't creative, and I thought that for a long time, but that's because, my brother was an artist, and I felt like I can't draw like my brother, I can't sing like my mother, I don't, I'm just not a creative person, and I'm whatever. But so that was a story that I had for a long time, but I think that everyone is creative, but there are a lot of people who don't ever tap into that or really cultivate that creativity because they don't see themselves as being creative. You know what I mean? And so when people have a talent like you did or your brother did for music, that it's really helpful, because then it's kind of like everyone can see that and let you indulge that. But then there's everybody else who they have talents and they have creativity too, but they might not have an outlet for it. And that is just going to diminish their sense of well-being.
I agree. People need to be able to see a creative interest to appreciate it. And that's very unfair because they're not always visible.
It's so true. It might take some digging, but there's something there.
Yeah,
there's always
absolutely.
something there. So interesting. Oh gosh, mother. Okay. Last one. And this is, they're all kind of, well, they're not totally, they're all related, but this one is that you love and you accept others for who they are. I don't find you to be the kind of person who you don't spend a lot of energy wishing people different. I think you accept people for who they are and where they are in their lives. And would you say that comes from, what you were saying before about treating people the way you want to be treated?
Absolutely. You know what? I think it's something within me that I really didn't think consciously about it. But if you go back and review it, it is exactly the way I would like to be treated, is the way that I treat other people. I don't want anyone to judge me. I want them to take me for who I am and accept that. Full acceptance is the key as far as I'm concerned. Mark's friend who lives in Vancouver sent me a message the other day that she was cycling along the water and she thought of Mark, who frequently comes to her mind when she's cycling. She says, seconds later, two tall guys on super tall bikes zipped past me. And she said, it felt just like for a minute that Mark was riding with me. She said, my eyes welled up and then I smiled broadly.
That's really sweet. So for those of you who are listening, my brother was super tall. Wow. That's really sweet. That's very special. Well, I have one more question for you, Mother, because I could literally talk to you all day. I have 5,000 more questions, but one more question. And this is a question I ask everyone who comes on the podcast. And that is,
Okay.
if you had a megaphone that was loud enough for the whole world to hear, and you could send out one message about love, what would that message be?
That message, that love is the most reciprocal type of relationship one can have.
Say more about that.
In a relationship, you should be able to give and receive, and that works for both people involved in a relationship.
Right, in any kind of relationship.
Any kind of a relationship.
Yeah, it's true. If you have a relationship where you're doing all the giving, or you have a relationship where you're doing all the receiving, then
It's not love.
you're really selling yourselves short.
It's not love. You can't even equate it with love. There's no way
Wow, that's deep, Mama. I gotta think about that.
that you can love a person and begrudge a person. They don't jibe.
Interesting. I'm thinking about the people who, and like I said, this is all types of relationships. I'm thinking about people in all types of relationships where they might be the person who does most of the giving in particular, because that's just a more common scenario that I encounter. The people that I know and
Sure.
work with tend to be the ones who are doing more of the giving. And I think what you're saying, it's not that you don't actually love that person. It's just that if you're not able to receive, I think that's just you're not able to love yourself enough to receive it.
Well, that too, but I think love is a misnomer there, because you're mistaking love for something that's much deeper.
Oh, what's deeper than love?
Well, a need that person has. I mean, you say, I love this person, but you're really saying, I'm a needy person. So I do all these things in hopes that person will love me. That's not rational, because you can't coerce someone to love you.
Well, that's certainly true.
It has to be, you can't force it. It has to be an absolute natural feeling. Got to be absolute.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, there's going to be a few things that you're going to tinker around the edges, but you've got to have that basic feeling that you're giving
And receiving.
and receiving.
Yeah. Oh, I dig it, Mother. I'm all about giving and receiving. So I love it. I try to give. I'm good at, I was actually thinking about that lately because Dan, who's my boyfriend, for those of you who are listening, he takes such good care of me. And he's very, like literally he's like making me dinner and bringing me my plate, and then I'm done eating, and then he's like clearing my plate for me. And so there are times that I'm like, I don't know if I have this level of, I don't want to make it sound like I'm just sitting around and he's serving me all the time, because trust me. This is one example, okay? But I just think like, man, he's so good at acts of service, like, taking care of me, doing all these things for me. And I mean, it's just not, I receive it very gratefully. Like, I don't take it for granted, And I definitely, give to him in other ways. But I think about that. I'm like, I hope I'm not, like, is he doing too much? I don't know. I think about that sometimes. But then I have to clean up the crumbs, and I'm like, you know what? He's not doing too much.
He's not doing too much. Yeah.
Mama, I love you so much.
I love you too, sweetie.
And I'm going to say something to you that you always said to us when we were kids, which I just appreciated so much, was not only do I love you, but I like you.
Oh, yes. Yes. Thank you. Thank you so much for that.
I like you so much.
Thanks so much for that, because that really is important,
Yeah, it really is. It really, really is. It's goodness, it makes life easier. And I hope that for anybody who's listening, maybe you don't have the best relationship with your mother or your father, or, just there's lots of challenges there. And listen, nothing is perfect in any family, including ours, right, Mother?
Right. Absolutely.
Definitely no perfection. But I guess one thing that I hope that people can take from this conversation, especially because there are ways that you have chosen to show up in your relationships that were a conscious decision permission to do what you didn't have modeled for you. You know what I'm saying? So like in terms of like we were talking about, like the acceptance, like accepting people for who they are and not judging them. And, you know, just that's not something, you know, you grew up in a household where it wasn't about acceptance, right? It was about compliance.
Do it or don't. Do it or die.
Yeah, exactly. It was about compliance. And even though you grew up with that, you still made a different choice for yourself and your own life. And I think that is, and I have those things that I grew up with that I've had to make a different choice. Sure. And that's just part of growing up. And I think hopefully maybe this conversation can spark some people to think of some things in your life or your family dynamics that, you know, didn't serve you and didn't work for you and may have been really painful for you, but you just know that you don't have to be a slave to that. Like you can actually break free from that and make a different choice for yourself. And that's what I hope that people get out of this conversation.
Yeah, it's a part of maturity, you know, because when you say growing up, you know, ostensibly you're talking to adults, but yes. This is maturity. I mean, you mature.
Yeah, I'm still growing up.
You mature in the way you tackle issues.
Yeah. Yep. Okay. All right. I love you. I'll talk to you later.
Too, darling. Okay.
Thank you again. And there you have it, my conversation with my mother. I hope that you enjoyed it. And, you know, I got to say, this was the first podcast episode where I actually cried. I cried a little bit when she was talking about my brother. And that was emotional, but it's all good. You know, I think when people meet my mom, I think they definitely understand me a lot better. And they're like, oh, I get why you've got some like poise about you. I'm like, yes, I completely inherited. I can't take any credit for it. So I hope that you enjoyed listening to my mother as much as I do. I could have kept going for hours and hours, but hopefully that was just the right amount of time. So for those of you who have not yet rated the podcast, if you are enjoying it, then I do invite you and encourage you to just give me a little 5-star review. I'd appreciate it so much. And also if you're moved to write a review, not just rate and write a review, then obviously I appreciate you even more. That's a beautiful thing. And also I wanted to, you know, just make sure that you guys stay in touch with me. And so there's a few ways to do that. Number one is just social media. And that is I'm at Dear Franny and at Dear Franny Podcast on Instagram and Facebook. I'm also at Dear Franny on Twitter. That's number one. Number two is that you can go to my website, which is francescahogi.com. And on my website, you can read my blog. You can listen to old podcast episodes. You can sign up. You can take my free dating archetype quiz, and there's different things. You can book a free session. You can book a pay what you can session. So there's lots of information on my website. So do check that out. Also, I have merch. I have merch now, guys. So you can go to dearfrannyshop.com. Dear Franny Shop. Everything is Dear Franny, just making it easy. dearfrannyshop.com, and you can just find your new favorite like t-shirts and sweatshirts and cool stuff. So check that out. And then last but not least, I also have a text number for you guys, a phone number. So you can text me at this number, no calls, but text please, 323-402-6863. That is 323-402-6863. Text me. And, you know, this is a U.S. phone number, regular U.S. phone number, but your normal messaging and data rates will apply. So just be mindful of that, especially if you are outside of the U.S. And again, that number is 323-402-6863. And it's this app called Community. And basically, I can just, you know, we can text each other. And so every now and again, I'll just text you a little, you know, it could be just a little message of encouragement or a photo or an announcement or something like that. But I encourage you to sign up one last time, 323-402-6863. All right. Have a beautiful day. Stay safe and healthy wherever you are in the world. Wear a mask. And for those of you in the United States, please make sure that you register to vote and check your voting status, because the election is coming up in 99 days and your voice matters and we need it. So thank you. Have a beautiful day, guys. Bye.